welcome back. Okay, today we're going to talk about more non-wage issues. A lot of people think the union contracts are all about the dime and all about the money, and that's a huge part of it. But there are many other issues they look at, and we've talked about some of those non-wage issues earlier, but we're going to talk about some more specific non-wage issues, and we're going to talk about a history of non-wage issues. Again, I believe that you need to know, everybody needs to know, if you're going to truly understand something, you need to understand the history of it. You can't say, well, what's going on today, and learn about it today. If it's been going on for 100 years, you need to kind of have an understanding of how that thing evolved. I just think that's important in everything we learn, not just academics, but in anything. So today we're going to look at the history of how work has been designed. Now, work design is a huge issue. It comes out of organizational theory. Basically, why is this work like it is? I see it's almost philosophical. Why do we do what we do? Work design asks questions like, do we really need management? Do we need a building? So we can sit around and just philosophically discuss these things. But what we do know is that we design the work. Management, the owners of the company, design the work. If you're ever looking around at a company, when you're working for a company and you're going, why is it like this? Well, it's like that because somebody decided it was going to be like that. So we're going to start with design of work. Now, why is that? What's that got to do with unions? Well, the thing is, design of work deals with quality of life a lot of times. It deals with like how you're treated at work, the working conditions. So that's very important to the unions, how you design this job. So we're going to start a little history of work design and see if that kind of makes sense with how it interacts with union activity and with the demands of union and the demands of the organization. Work design really started 1910, thereabouts, because up till then we really didn't have the kind of organizations that we study today. The Industrial Revolution created the need for these organizations, and they were brand new, so it was like a blank slate. So we go back in time, and the first place we think we can identify where there was a definite work design going on was around 1910, and it's known as Taylorism, from Fred Taylor. And I'm sure you're familiar with Fred Taylor, the godfather of managerial science. He was known for coming in and looking at an organization and saying, my goodness, we really are not following any rules right here. It's helter-skelter. We're doing whatever we want to do. So just to give you a little background on Fred Taylor was an engineer by training. He went to work for a steel company as an engineer. When he got to the steel company, he was amazed at the process that was going on, because this is what he found. That if you worked for the steel company and you were a laborer, and you got to work early one day, and a train had just pulled up, and we needed to unload the raw materials off the train, and you were the first one in the gate, well, you go unload the train. You did that, no big deal. You kind of drug in a little late that day, or not late, or toward right when it started to be time to be there, and all of a sudden they were cranking up the furnace to melt the steel or whatever, and they said, well, you go over there, they need you over there right now. Well, the next day, if the guy who got there early and was unloading the train got there late, they sent him to do some other job, maybe melting the steel or something. It all depended. When you walked in, they'd say, you go over there, you go over there. Nobody did the same job every day. Fred Taylor went, this is insane. How can these people learn these jobs and be proficient at these jobs if they're doing a different thing every day? So Fred Taylor came up with the idea of work specialization. You're going to be the train unloader. I'm going to teach you how to unload the train every day. That's what you're going to do. You're going to unload the train. And hopefully you'll be the best train unloader we've ever had. And if you're going to be the guy who starts the furnace to melt the steel, you're going to be the guy. Every day that's going to be your job. So when you come in, it doesn't depend when you come in. When you come in, you know exactly what you're going to do. We're going to train you for that job. You're going to be the expert of that job. And Fred Taylor believed this will make it much more effective and efficient for companies to do. So he started that. Now, Fred Taylor's whole point was efficiency. You know, I never knew Fred, and so I'm not making dispersions about Fred. But I don't think Fred was real worried about the worker. Fred was worried about getting the job done. That's important, but that's all Fred was concerned about, it seems. So Fred's whole point was, let's be efficient. And it almost goes back to, remember we talked about earlier, my job as a manager is to work you so hard today that I get every last bit of things I can get out of you without killing you, so that you can go home, rest for 8 hours, get up in the morning, come back and do me a good job tomorrow. That's how I treated you. It was almost like an asset with a depreciable lifespan. And yeah, I knew at some point you were going to be dead. That machine's going to be dead, and you're going to be dead, and that's just the way it is. So Fred had that attitude. The efficiency, let me get the absolute most I can out of you every day. And one way he did that, now some of the things Fred did and you disagree with, well, thank you, Fred, for saying you need to be the guy who unloads the train every day. That's your job, learn that well. So that was about 1910. In the same kind of time period, so let me just make a differentiation, 1910, 1920. About 1920, we had something known as Fordism, and that's from Henry Ford. Henry Ford obviously wanted efficiency just like Fred Taylor did. But Henry Ford decided he was going to try to use technology to create these efficiencies. So Henry Ford is known for the assembly line. There's questions whether Henry Ford was the first one to say, hey, let's put it on the assembly line. I doubt that's the case. However, he was the first one that really put it into large-scale operations. So Henry, you get that bonus, you get that prize. So Henry Ford said, I want to use technology. And that's what it was. Back in the day, you'd build a car right here. You'd put the chassis here. Then you'd put the transmission in, and then you'd put this in, and you put, but it all was right here. And so I'd have to run over here and get a part, or run over there and get a part. Henry Ford said, that's crazy. Let's put it on this moving line. Let's make the line slow, that you can actually do your particular job right there. And now, going back to Fred Taylor, specialty of work, all I want you to do all day is put axles on this thing that comes by. It's all I want you to know about this car. I want you to be the best axle dude on the planet. So Taylorism started the efficiency thing. Ford said, let me ramp that up a little bit. Let me put a little technology in that. So you got Taylorism, you got Fordism. Then about 1935, 1940, you have something called the drive system. This was just an evolution. So what the drive system suggests is we've got the efficiencies of Taylorism. We've got the technology of Fordism. Now I need somebody to stand over this human element that might mess up my efficiencies, that might mess up my technologies, stand over this human element and beat them into work. And I use that term lightly. Just literally beat them into work, stand over them. That's where the word drive system comes from. I'm going to drive you into efficiency. I'm going to drive you into this technology so that you're going to maximize my profits. You're going to maximize production. So it wasn't a very friendly time for workers. So you can see as we're going through this efficiency, technological advancements. Now I'm standing over you, making sure you work till you're almost dead. Workers resented that. Even though production was going out the roof, you can't deny that. The economy was doing great up until the Depression, and that didn't have anything to do with these things. But the point is, you had these things that on paper looked great, on a spreadsheet looked great, but then when you applied them to the human condition, human beings did not react real well to this kind. So as these things are increasing, you can understand that people were becoming very displeased. This is just not really cool. But that's the history. So then we go into World War II, and right as we're going into World War II, we have an overlap. We talked about this earlier, but we had the corporatist era. Now this has got to do with job design, the corporatist era. And if you remember, the corporatist era was from 1940 to 1970, and it basically said unions are here to stay. We don't like them. We wish they weren't here, but you know, we've got federal law that lets them be there, and there's not a daggum thing we can do to get rid of them. So let's just figure out how to design our work to handle unions with the least problems we can do. And that started around 1935, 1940, this corporatist era, you know. And we're still going to, and now the corporatist era is the unions are in here, and the unions are kind of fussing about Taylorism and Fordism and the drive system. So you really have this confrontational kind of issue. We've got these behaviors that management has taken on, and they have led to productivity. However, they don't sit well a lot of times with workers. Then you got the unions, on the other hand, this corporatist group is coming in saying, we don't like that. So you've got this conflict. Then, in the 60s, we kind of came around to something called workplace transformation. That's the fifth issue in this historical lineage. And basically, workplace transformation said, you know, instead of standing over people and just beating them in the head, driving them, causing, you know, differences of opinion among human beings, causing differences of opinion about these two groups, the union and management, maybe we need to look at, like, instead of beating you into work harder, maybe I need to train you how to work harder. Maybe I need to develop you. I need to give you more skills. Instead of standing over you going, work harder, maybe I need to take you and train you on the aspects of this job so that in fact you can do a better job, a more quality-oriented job. And that's where workplace transformation comes into play. So this was like kind of a transformation. The Industrial Revolution created, you remember, necessity is the mother of invention. So in the 1910s, all of a sudden we had this technology, and they said, all you got to do is build a building and put this technology in, and boy, you can just go crazy. Well, we had never done that before. So we said, yeah, on paper, the technology works, the machinery works, the engineering works. It took us a while to figure out how the human being was going to interact into that. And that's why we went through Taylorism, Fordism, etc. So that's kind of how that progression happened. All right, we're still talking about job design. One thing we haven't talked about yet is the different types of unions that are allowed by law and how these unions interact with the organization and how that affects the design of the work and the design of the organization, because it will. When I'm talking about work design, and when you talk about organizational theory and that big philosophical view, it's like I'm an amoeba. Imagine a company as an amoeba. You know what an amoeba is? An amoeba. And this amoeba kind of floats around, and you know, sometimes it's kind of symmetrical and all, but if it needs to get around something or go through something, it can change its shape, and it will change its shape. But an amoeba doesn't go, I need to change my shape. The amoeba reacts to the environment. All of a sudden the environment says, amoeba, if you want to keep going straight, you need to kind of get real thin and squeeze up. So the amoeba does that and squeezes up and goes right on by doing its business. Company's the same way. Company's this amorphic shape, and it's just normal and natural, and all of a sudden it runs into some encounter. It needs to go around something, through something, between something. It will change its shape to do that. I know this is real philosophical, and this is what organizational theory is all about. That's such a cool topic. But we're talking about how organizations smush around to accommodate these different types of unions that we're going to talk about right now. So, there are 4 basic types of unions. I know there's probably some, you know, maybe 5 or 6 out there that are crazy. 4 basic types. Let's just get real. 4 basic types. The first type of union shop is called the open shop. The second type of union shop is called the union shop. The third type of union shop is called the closed shop. And the fourth type of union shop is called the agency shop. And we're going to talk about each one of those independently. So the open shop. Open shop is a union. Now, let me back up. What determines whether you're an open shop, union shop, closed shop, agency shop? What determines that is the contract that you bang out with the company. So if you're and we're going to talk about it later, but if you're a closed shop, it's because the company and the union have both signed a contract that said you will be this is a closed shop. So that's who determines it. The union and the company, they both agree on what kind of shop you will have. And if they don't sign the contract, etc. But there again, I keep going back to this. It's not like somebody come in and imposes these things on the company or the union. This is a contract that both parties sign. So let's move on here. Let me quit digressing. Let's go back to open shop. It's in the contract. We have a union. We have gone through the legal process. We are recognized and we have a contract. And in the contract, both parties agreed that we would have what's known as an open shop here at this organization. And the open shop says that yes, we do have representation. We do have a union and it's recognized and it went through the legal process and it's here. But you never have to join the union to be able to work here. We can hire brand new people and they can say, here's a union, should I join it or not? They make the decision. They can join it voluntarily if they want, or they can say, I'm not joining the union. Refuse to join the union. That's in the contract. It's called an open shop. The second is called a union shop. It's in the contract. It says we have a union here. And if you want to work here for this company, you have to join the union. And it's usually 30 to 60 days. You go to apply for the job, they like you, and they say, we'd like to hire you, and we're going to hire you, but you have to join the union within 30, 60 days. It all depends on the time period, but it's pretty short. You have to join the union. And if we hire you and you do not join the union within that time period, you will be terminated. So you have to join the union as a condition of employment. People go, that's terrible. Who agreed to that? Well, the company agreed to that. Because if the company agreed to that, it wouldn't be in the contract. The third thing, closed shop. Why is it a closed shop? Because the union and the company put it in the contract that they both signed. A closed shop says to be even considered for employment here, you have to be a union member, an existing, paid up, card carrying union member. Don't even apply here if you can't show me that you are an active participating union member, which means you're paying your dues. How crazy is that? So we won't even hire people who are not currently a union member. Now some people go, a lot of students go, that's terrible, just the company agreed to that. Okay, just keep that in mind. And the fourth one, agency shop. It says we have a union here, recognized union. You can work here, but you don't have to join the union. You just don't. However, you got to pay union dues. You don't have to join the union. We can't make you join that. But because the thinking is the union has fought for all these rights and privileges that you now enjoy, even though you're not a union member, you're going to have to pay into the union. You're going to have to pay your dues because of what they've done. So agency shop, you don't have to join the union, but daggum, you got to pay your dues. Now, these are the four types, basic types of unions that you will see. There's one last thing we need to talk about while we're talking about these union types and organizational design, work design. there's something known as right to work states. There are 24 of them. 24 right to work states. Right to work states, the concept of right to work states was created in 1947 Taft-Hartley Act. Remember, that's when the pendulum swung back to management, swung back to the freedom of the American citizen, about you don't have to do anything that you really don't want to do. So that's where the concept began. 24 states, South Carolina is one of them, have voted in state legislation and passed laws that have now said we are known as a right to work state, which says under no conditions will you ever be forced to join a union as a precursor of employment. So South Carolina has unions. You can follow the Wagner Act and become a union in South Carolina and be organized and recognized by your company as a union. However, the only kind of shop you can have is an open shop. You cannot ever require anybody to join a union as a requirement of coming to work here. So 24 states have right to work states. So there are 24 states that can only have union shops. They can't have a closed shop, they can't have a union shop, they can't have an agency shop. And there's a huge debate about that, whether that's a good thing or not, but that's a state decision, state by state. So we've got 24 states that are right to work states that say under no condition, under no situation will you ever have to join a union as a condition of employment. So we've kind of talked about job design. We've talked about how the union experience and the philosophy of how management has tried to organize labor and work, how those two have played, they've interacted with each other. Companies are obviously looking for effectiveness and efficiency, and unions are looking for worker rights and a better quality of work. And sometimes those things butt heads, sometimes they don't. But the point is, it's an interactive agreement and it's an ongoing agreement, and it's certainly going to move and continue into the future. So here is the discussion about work design, another non-wage issue. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you later. Peace.